Today there was an insane sequence of events that ended up with the head of the biggest Russian's private military company, the Wagner Group, Prigozhin, starting a coup on the territory of the Russian Federation and declaring that his goal is to remove the Russian defense minister, Shoigu, and the chief of the general staff, Gerasimov, and that anyone who stands in his way will be destroyed. The day started with the release of an exclusive interview with Prigozhin, where he raised the most uncomfortable questions, exposed the biggest lies told by the highest Russian officials, and revealed the terrifying reality of the war. In particular, he exposed the fact that the main reason why Russia started the war is that, firstly, the Russian defense minister, Shoigu, wanted to go down in history as a marshal and a two-times hero of the Russian Federation, and secondly, because the Russian elite wanted to usurp Ukrainian assets. 4 hours later, Prigozhin published a video showing that Wagner forces camps in the deep rear suffered a terrible strike. He claimed that Shoigu, who recently visited the Rostov region, did so in order to personally command the special operation to destroy Wagner forces. He claimed that their camps were hit with rockets and artillery and then raided by assault helicopters. Prigozhin said that he was gathering all his forces and heading toward Moscow to wipe out the Russian Ministry of Defense. In response, the Russian Ministry of Defense effectively launched a criminal investigation for instigation of a coup, threatening Prigozhin with up to 20 years in prison. They effectively seized Wagner's centers in St. Petersburg, and forbade all media channels to even mention Prigozhin's claims and declarations. Prigozhin did not back down. There was a hacker attack on Russian channels, which started translating Prigozhin's announcement that he was heading to Moscow. The Russian ministry realized that this was getting serious, shut down the internet in some regions, set ready all their special forces, such as Rosgvardia, Grom, and SOBR, closed the border with the Luhansk and Donetsk regions, closed the highways, enacted the fortress plan, and started building fortifications on the roads to meet and destroy the Wagner forces. The streets in the Russian cities were gradually filled with heavy equipment for direct and heavy confrontations. As a last desperate move, the Russian Ministry of Defense released a series of appeals to the Wagner soldiers. At first, the videos featured many different regular Russian formations along the whole front line who asked Wagner to return to the front. Then they used Prigozhin's friend, General Surovikin, to ask Prigozhin to stop, and finally, they even asked the deputy chief of the general staff, Alexeyev, who helped Prigozhin to establish his private military company, to stop before it is too late. Prigozhin claimed that despite the ministry's orders, they passed the border and initial block posts with no hurdles because the oppressed Russian soldiers were reportedly happy that someone was finally going to push back. He asked others to do the same because whoever stood in their way would be destroyed. Next, the Russian Ministry of Defense ordered to conduct an airstrike on the Wagner's convoys, which had already entered the Rostov region, and Prigozhin claimed that they shot down several helicopters. Later, videos emerged of direct confrontation between the regular Russian detachments and Wagner forces. Eventually, the Wagner forces prevailed and continued their movement. Locals continued releasing footage of Wagner columns passing through the region, where Wagner forces were moving all types of weapons, from machine guns, drone launchers, and mortar systems to tanks and artillery. Soon, this equipment was used to seize their first target, the headquarters of the Southern Military District, which commands 70,000 soldiers. Wagner forces surrounded the building with tanks and blocked the movement. Later they also seized police stations, federal security services, and regional administration, effectively seizing control over the whole Rostov region. Right now, the Wagner forces have just entered the Voronezh region. Locals are posting videos with audible gunfire. In the meantime, the Russian Ministry of Defense is reinforcing Moscow.